Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Dr. Sally Blair, Senior Director of Fellowship Programs here at the National Endowment for Democracy. On behalf of NED's International Forum for Democratic Studies, I'm pleased to welcome everyone to today's presentation, Ethiopia's Democratic Transition, One Step Forward, Two Steps Back, featuring Reagan-Fussell Democracy Fellow Merera Gudina Jeffy. We are delighted to have with us also as a discussant Eric Robinson, Senior Program Officer for the Africa Program at the National Endowment for Democracy. Funded by the U.S. Congress, the Reagan-Fussell Democracy Fellows Program hosts some of the world's most dedicated democracy activists, scholars, and journalists to conduct independent research and pursue projects here at NED. Now in our 13th year, the program has hosted more than 200 fellows from over 80 countries since its founding in 2001. Within this remarkable group, our speaker today stands out for his unwavering commitment to democracy in Ethiopia. In 1991, the Ethiopian People's Revolutionary Democratic Front, EPRDF, claimed power following a bloody civil war that toppled the country's military regime. The EPRDF promised to usher in an era of multi-party democracy and ethnic equality, and to put an end to the command economy. Yet despite the introduction of a new constitution in 1995, the EPRDF has suppressed meaningful democratic change during its 2 decades in power by institutionalizing a de facto one-party state. The resulting gap between popular expectations and Ethiopia's political reality has increased frustrations among citizens, and ongoing violence, such as recent clashes on university campuses, indicates the depth of unresolved tensions. In his presentation, Merera will evaluate the EPRDF's performance and offer recommendations for domestic actors and the international community. His presentation will be followed by comments by Eric Robinson. Merera is Associate Professor of Political Science and International Relations at Addis Ababa University, where he previously served as Chair of the Department of Political Science and member of the Academic Commission of the College of Social Sciences. He is a former member of the Ethiopian Parliament, where he served from 2005 to 2010, and is currently leading 2 opposition groups, the Oromo Federalist Congress and the Ethiopian Federal Democratic Unity Forum. He is the author of 2 books on political developments in Ethiopia, Ethiopia from Autocracy to Revolutionary Democracy, 1960s to 2011, and Ethiopia, Competing Ethnic Nationalisms and the Quest for Democracy, 1960 to 2000. He has also published articles in academic journals, including the African Journal of Political Science, the Journal of East African Studies, and the Horn of Africa Journal. He has been interviewed on CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera for his perspectives on political trends in Ethiopia. During his fellowship, Merera is exploring opposition politics, political polarization, and the role of the Ethiopian diaspora in facilitating democratization in Ethiopia. Our discussant today, Eric Robinson, has been with the endowment for 6 years and is the Senior Program Officer for East, Horn, and Southern Africa. Prior to joining the endowment, he worked in Somalia as a consultant with the United Nations and for a small national nonprofit organization that did capacity building training for refugee and asylee-led civil society organizations in the United States. We will now turn the floor over to Merera, who will speak for approximately 25 minutes, followed by Eric for about 10 minutes. For those of you on Twitter, you can follow this presentation and contribute to the conversation by using the hashtag NEDEvents or by following the forum at Think Democracy and the endowment at NE Democracy. If you have not already done so, please join me in silencing your cell phones. And let me thank the many staff members involved with this event, most especially research associates Hillary Collins and Heiner Sibrian, who have offered vital assistance to the fellowship project and today's presentation. Thank you.
Uh, Thank you very much, Sally. I thank all the NED family for their support to come here and also helping me to do what is required of me. My presentation today on Ethiopia's democratic transition, one step forward and two steps backward. Probably Ethiopians say several steps backward. Anyway, prefer the two steps backward. My presentation is organized around 5 major issue areas. One is capturing state power by the TPLF, and it is initial promise, or TPLF EPRF, and it is initial promises. And the two successive regimes, measures of the Ethiopian People's Revolutionary Democratic Front to consolidate state power in order to transform that carrying out state transformation in Ethiopia. And then responses of the regime to the Arab Spring, quietly but surely, and the current crisis. And the two final thing is, I'm committing to the opposition, the internal weakness of the Ethiopian opposition, and the way forward. The TPLF of EPRF came to power in 1991 by making what we call three triple promises: ethnic-based federalism, multi-party democracy, and market economy. As we shall see, the central problem of these three promises are that when the TPLF was coming to power in 1991, the whole world was using Mao Zedong's guerrilla tactic or strategy. The whole world was changing, and the Soviet Union started to be disintegrated. East Europe was going back to the Western camp, and really socialism was retiring as a competing global ideology. Therefore, the only power on earth that can give the master key to the gate of power became the US. So they started American music. American music that is multi-party democracy, free and fair elections, rule of law, free media, and in fact what's very beautiful to the Western ears. The problem is until today, the EPRF leaders have continued to dance their own dance, right? But they play American music. That is the central problem of the transition sponsored by the current Ethiopian regime. The Ethiopian regime. And in this transition, in 90, when they were conducting what we call the conference, July conference, and then creating the transitional government, it was looked like what we call a wedding party, inviting friends and denying enemies. And opposition parties of long standing were excluded, while parties created overnight were invited. Then what happened was the charter, EPRF, the charter was dominated by the political program of one party, which later translated to the charter, and then which later translated to the national constitution. In 1994, what the EPRF did was to engineer what we call national constitution, which is more or less the translation of the EPRF political program. Then the EPRF also, it started before creating PDOs. We call them PDOs because the EPRF was creating, or the TPLF was creating, one ethnic group, one political party for one ethnic group, each ethnic group in the country, by using them for state control and so on and so forth. So the relationship in this EPRF, thing is, it was like what we call Orwellian, George Orwell's Animal Farm. All animals are equal, but some animals are equal more than others. You look at the TPLF, which is the central controlling force. The rest are taking orders and implementing those orders for the real ruling party, that was the EPRF. And then the EPRF conducted several elections, one in 1992, the other one in 1992, 1995. in the 2000, and the 1992 and the 1995 was really totally the opposition boycotted it. It was an affair of one party. The 2000 elections, we participated, the opposition participated, but really the participation was nominal, and the opposition was only allowed to win only one city, 13 seats, and the major question at that time, or the all-important question at that time, was Ethiopians were left wondering which way is power to be transferred, through the barrel of the gun or the ballot box. That is a barrel of the gun. You know that Mao Zedong's dictum, power comes out of the barrel of the gun. And then the EPRDF continued to conduct elections. The one during the 2005 elections, or by any standard, was what creates the rising expectation among Ethiopians. It was a new, a type of relatively free and fair elections in Ethiopia's long recorded history, that the opposition participated in it in what we call in a very massive way. But the opposition was allowed to win only 171 seats. With the problem with this election was that I was participating in that election. I think the EPRDF was defeated between CUD and UDF, but stayed in power by doing what we call massive rigging. Not only the massive rigging, the problem with this elections was that the EPRDF introduced what we call new laws in the parliament, which is totally not only controlling the parliament, but made the parliament irrelevant by introducing new laws. For example, a very good example, during the 2000 elections and before, when the opposition had only 13 seats, to table an agenda for debate at the parliament, only 20 seats or 20 members were required. When the opposition won 171 seats, then the goalpost was changed to what? To 183, because we are just won about one third, so they moved up the goalpost so that the opposition cannot do that one. The Ethiopian populace reacted. In that reaction, the regime turned it to very repressive. 200 people were killed. Thousands were headed to wounded, and more than 50,000 people were headed to prison. And then after the 2005 elections, the regime continued to take its measures, especially introduced a lot of laws. For example, amended an electoral law, amended political parties law, amended the media law, introduced a new anti-terrorism law, introduced a new civil society law, introduced an electoral code of conduct. All of these are designed to dangerously narrow down the political space and negating the key provisions in the national constitution. In fact, not only that, the EPRDF increased its membership from about 750,000 during 2005 elections to 5 million during 2010 elections. It also increased its local government members from about 600,000 local councillors to 3.6 million. That means it created a very massive parasitic class that was living on the ruling party for life. In this, you see, during the 2010 elections, how the former prime minister was getting the elections right. You know, pushing a small citizen to a ballot box that to make sure the government got the right number. And so on. Therefore, by the 2010 elections, the government handpicked 220,000 the election officers throughout the country, deployed in 43,000 polling stations, polling stations, and then really the EPRDF made itself both a referee and a player at the same time. And if you are allowed to take your own referee to a football field, imagine what the result could be. That is exactly what the EPRDF did. Then the regime continued with its massive repression, especially very quietly. Many people did not notice it, but very quietly, in a way, it responded to the Arab Spring through what we call massive repression. For example, they started what we call increased preventive detention. Preventive detention means you detain people not for what they did, the crimes they committed, but for the crimes they might commit in the in the eyes of the regime. So they started preventive detention. A lot of people were detained in Oromia regions, including former parliamentarians. Members, young leaders of the UDJ were detained. Very good numbers of outspoken media personnel were detained, and so on and so forth. And then the EPRDF, after a year or so, moved to what we call massive intervention in religious affairs, especially the Ethiopian Muslims became the target. And you know that they were accused of anti-terrorism, and a lot of them are still languishing in prison. And at least the Ethiopians are really should be thankful to them, including the Ethiopian government, that for the last 2 years, the very massive Muslim protests across Ethiopia did not turn violent. Still, they have promised peaceful protest. Continue to do that. It's only the Ethiopian regime which is expected to respond to positively to peaceful protest. Then the Ethiopian government continued, for example, it is a new strategy such as for creating a development army. In this development army, a bondage of 5 to 1, 5 people bonded to 1 person. This includes the university professors and the students. That means every 5 people are controlled by 1 person reporting on their activities. This is across the country, including university students, professors. It is really, I never read even in the days of Joseph Stalin, bonding millions of people in that way. It is a new system of control, or a new type of control. The regime, as you know, you should be able to understand the Ethiopian reality, or in the context of the Ethiopian reality. It was the mother of all problems. All problems is the Maoist strategy of the ruling party, what they call revolutionary democracy, which takes a Leninist principle of democratic centralism. In this democratic centralism, fusion of party and the state is allowed. Fusion between party and the state is allowed. Undermining separation of power is allowed. And then using the mechanism of, for example, using the party to own a business empire is allowed. In fact, no independent institution is allowed in the country to function properly democratically. No independent institutions. So you go to the court, you go to the parliament, you go to the army, you go to the police, you go to the civil administration, even you go to the media and the ombudsman, what they call the institution to check on excessive power of the executive branch. All are controlled by one party. All are controlled by one party. This is in contravention of many articles of the Constitution. Probably we come back to it later. Here, until today, the regime continued its repressive measures, such as, for example, dividing groups using by ethnic politics, blocking opposition access to public media, and continued land grabbing and massive displacement, especially continued repression in the killing. As you know, especially the Oromo students, last as of the end of April, where you probably see here Senator Kerry or Secretary Kerry was giving a photo opportunity to the Ethiopian officials to make them look like good, while you just below you see the thousands of Oromo students were attacked, and several of them were killed. In fact, in my home area, Ambo. No, not far from Addis Ababa, about 100 kilometers. When the killing was taking place, Senator Kerry was taking a good photo with Ethiopian officials. With this, probably I also moved to our part, that is the opposition part, the weakness of the opposition, especially in terms of political polarization. As you know, Ethiopia's opposition is very diverse, very diverse. There are armed liberation movements such as the All Left Liberation Movement, Front, the Ogaden National Liberation Front, and many also unarmed groups such as Madrak, UDJ, Shango, operating from the outside, and other groups such as Gimbot 7. And as the opposition, both at home and abroad, are divided along ethnic and political lines. That is really where the serious the opposition fragmentation and the division is the very serious problem in the democratic transition. While we blame the regime, we are also divided. Especially this the division, the diaspora, which is my major study at NED, the diaspora really contributing both positively and negatively. I hope the Ethiopian diaspora can understand me. On one side, the Ethiopian diaspora is our lifeline. Without the diaspora, we cannot survive at all. Because of the shrinking political space, because of the type of marginalization we are facing at home, we cannot survive without the support of the diaspora. This is clear. We can also, as you see from the diaspora, also helping us in connecting the Ethiopian opposition to the outside world in terms of demonstrating, in terms of linking really us to outside world, especially the human rights organizations and others. But our problem is that the opposition in the diaspora or the diaspora tends to support opposition with less accommodative political agendas. I think that this can show, and we should make it clear that the diaspora opposition tends to give partisan support to the political groups with less accommodative political agendas. That means ossifying the division of the opposition, and that means undermining the unity and the purpose of the opposition. So the Ethiopian diaspora, when investing, I think should think twice and three times what its contribution should be. And it is an area of negotiation, should be an area of negotiation between the opposition at home and abroad. Especially sometimes also the diaspora sometimes be more militant than the opposition at home. There should be some reasons why they are more militant than as the opposition at home. And then when we come to the way forward, we have a simple checklist for the Ethiopian government, or simple demands for the Ethiopian government, such as it calls federalism. We want genuine federalism. We want ethnic equality. We want democratic governance, fully respecting political and human rights of citizens. We want free and fair elections. We want accountability for officials. As you know, Ethiopian officials are increasingly becoming corrupt. We also want a free media. We want observance of the rule of law by the government. We want especially the government engage in national reconciliation to create national consensus for the democratization. That means we want stopping privatization of the state. In political science, we call privatization of the state when all institutions in the country and the resources of the country reduced to serve the interest of one group. That is what we call privatization of the state. And then we want stopping blocking genuine democratic transition in the name of development, as our government is calling itself a developmental state. And three, the ruling party should know that conducting every 5 years Soviet-era elections cannot help neither democracy nor genuine federalism. This is what we want from the Ethiopian regime. And to move forward, we have about at least 10 points of negotiation or demands. The Ethiopian regime should start to restructure the election board. The Ethiopian regime should, to maintain its independence and neutrality. The Ethiopian regime should provide reasonable access to the public media. It should release political prisoners. It should repeal draconian laws discriminating, criminalizing dissent, and minimizing political space. It should stop illegally running a party business empire, and at the same time also the Gongos. You know the Gongos. The Gongos are government-created NGOs, not the normal NGOs, to rechannel international resources. Again, we also the 4 points of negotiation, or our demands should be stopping. To stop the government should stop discriminatory access to government services. That includes a lot of services, including food aid. Stop the misuse of public funds and the resources for elections during elections. During elections, stop, as I said, the privatization of that, what I just said, stop the use of developmental state as a cover to authoritarian rule. And that really, the so-called developmental state is a misnomer. You know that Ethiopians, not less than 10 million Ethiopians are starving each year and living on handouts from the West. And the development the Ethiopian regime is calling, much of it is not for the citizens, but probably for the pockets of the ruling party. You know that the International Integrity Fund is telling us, the last figure I saw was around 16.1 billion USD capital flight from Ethiopia, the last figure I saw. The way forward in terms of the opposition, I think I think we can have diverse views, but I suggest about 8 commandments for the opposition as a whole. One is that the opposition should work together to agree on and implement a common democratic game. We could have diverse views, but there is a need to have what we call agreed upon democratic game, which will take all of us, at least along the road of transformation. Then produce leaders that can think broadly and work more inclusively. All of Ethiopian opposition leaders are claiming that we are all positive, all inclusive, all living above or whatever. Still a lot of limitations. And also another thing is create more broadened accommodative alliances that can work for a common goal. Creation of alliances is also a problem to us. Ethiopians are very good at alliance making and breaking, and really we are seriously failing, successfully failing, maintaining alliances. Really, maintain alliances. We could not have the wisdom of maintaining alliances, or miserably or successfully failing to maintain alliances. That should come to end. Work to become a relevant political force without really aggregation of interest in the coming together. It remains a dream of becoming what we call a political force, a relevant political force that can be reckoned with the government and the international community too. And then the other thing is that the opposition, I think, should the opposition, especially our diaspora brothers, should be start what we call in the way forward, redefine their role. The diaspora should start to redefine its role. Are they willing? Are they prepared to lead us by remote control, or are they prepared to support the opposition at home? That line, very thin line, should be at least should be discussed and agreed upon. Secondly, the diaspora should stop pulling the opposition apart. Most often we are getting divided because of your support. I think there is a need for frank discussion. Then the diaspora should learn to invest its resources for united action to bring about a united democratic Ethiopia. Investing in this group or that group did not help or has not helped in the last 23 years. I don't think it is going to help for the coming 23 years unless we learn to invest our resources in a common good rather than in division, and learn how to work to get towards national consensus rather than political polarization. Ethiopians are very good at at the division, at polarizing, but really we are short of aggregating our interest, especially the common interest. Then work to become a relevant political force, which just I said, in the international arena, rather than begging the State Department through demonstrations. I'm not saying don't demonstrate for us when we got detained or imprisoned. What I'm saying is that both the Americans and the God help those who help themselves. Unless Ethiopians help ourselves, unless we do our homework, I don't think the State Department can help as much. I don't think God can help as much. That is the ABC of probably politics that we should understand and that really work on it. Recognize that agreeing in implementing a common democratic game is the only way forward, rather than seeking supremacy of this group or that group. The supremacy we have been seeking, trying to build, has failed for the last 23 years. And I don't think we are going to get much in the coming years unless we change our attitude and the way we work and the way we conduct our politics, both at home and abroad. Finally, to the international community. The international community. Yeah, I'm the guest of Ned, so the international community. Anyway, I think the international community, especially the Americans, knows that sacrificing democracy for the sake of war on terror is immoral, unjust, and against its citizens' democratic values. This is one. Secondly, I think it is time that they also stop supporting dictatorial regime that terrorize millions of its citizens for the sake of anti-terrorism. And then the international community or the Americans make the hard choice between investing in the future of the people of Ethiopia and investing in the future of our dictators. The Americans are also should be able to use their donors' leverage to demand universal standards of free and fair elections, as well as respect for the rule of law in the media. I say this because the Ethiopian constitution, especially on regarding human rights and others, is very beautiful. But it is time that the Americans are also start to ask our dictators, walk your talk, respect your constitution. No less, no more. That is what I want to make it clear. The other thing is that it is high time that the American government, which calls itself leader of the democratic world and claiming championing democracy across the world, also start to walk its talks. Start to walk its talks. And finally, it's high time that the American foreign policy makers stop thinking in terms of good dictators and the bad dictators. Compare Mugabe and the former Prime Minister of Mallas. For all practical purposes, Mugabe had about half of his parliament from the opposition. Ethiopia has got just only one. Ethiopia is supported, and Mugabe is a bad in the American book. So I think our foreign friends and the democrats in the U.S. also start to think along that line. And if all of us can do our homework, I think the hope for Ethiopian democratization can be materialized in our lifetime. Thank you.
My congratulations. Thank you, Merera, for that very passionate and energetic statement. We now have time for comments from Eric Robinson before we turn to Q&A with our guests. Eric.
Thank you very much, Sally. I can see that we have more than 100 people in the room, and I've been given 10 minutes to talk, so I think I'm going to try and keep myself to 7 minutes. So we have plenty of time for all of the people in here, many of whom I recognize, to ask questions. So I'm actually going to start my timer and stop mid-sentence at 7 minutes. Okay. Where to start with this? There's so much. I've been following this for a long, long time. I started in Washington, D.C. My first job started working with an Africa policy analyst in May of 1998. And I think many of you in the room know what was happening in May of 1998. That was the start of the Ethiopian-Eritrean conflict. And my relationship with the region since then has been complicated, but it's been really fulfilling, and it's been a pleasure getting to know many people in the region, particularly in my work through the National Endowment for Democracy. Quickly, I'm going to comment on the diaspora, international community, Ethiopian government, and finally a few notes about your work. You know, I'm going to echo some of what Dr. Merera has said. To the diaspora, and I won't speak to the opposition because I think you're a much more authoritative voice on the opposition. To the diaspora, you're often told to speak with one voice. When policymakers want to come to you, they're tired of hearing a cacophony of sounds, and they demand that you come with one voice, come with one message, come with one platform. That's not fair. That's not very democratic. You have a right to have a multiplicity of ideas and voices. However, to that end, you also want to be effective. Dr. Merera made the point in his presentation that standing outside of the State Department in competing camps, yelling at one another and vilifying the EPRDF and TPLF isn't always effective. So agree to disagree on a certain number of points. Identify some things that you can disagree on. but still work together. Come up with a common platform, but still emphasize your differences at the same time. This is critical. You need to come with a message to the State Department, to policymakers, something that's clear that they can act upon that's related to policy. Focus on things that are moving forward in general. However, you shouldn't let go of those things that deal with historical redress, particularly in relation to crimes against humanity or against human rights violations. I think you still look backward and make sure you emphasize those points as well. I would say that one job that you have is to really get the international community to look in the mirror. Get the international community to look at its own constitutions, to get it to walk the talk, as it were. I think that's a significant job and role that you can play while you're living in places like Canada, United States, France. You have a right to make people look in the mirror. I think that's a good segue to the international community. The international community should also look in the mirror and look at its own constitutions and make sure that it's upholding the opportunities for people in other countries. That being said, it's incredibly difficult decisions are being made in Ethiopia, and it's the philosophy of how you approach it that's been discussed for a long time around the world. You have the needs that are being met through assistance for humanitarian assistance, for education, for health care, for 90 million people. This is vital. It's important. And then also, as Dr. Merera points out, you have the needs of people in terms of their freedoms and their rights that are enshrined in the Ethiopian Constitution. How do you balance those two? I would say that not enough bravery has been shown by the international community in sitting down itself to make sure that it walks the talk and that it makes some hard decisions on blending those two needs. I think that's critical if it wants to be honest and fulfill the aspirations of 90 million people in Ethiopia. Also, along those lines, it's okay if you give $4 billion a year in assistance, it's okay to make some demands. You don't have to completely genuflect to the EPRDF because there is a role that they play in terms of counterterrorism in the region. If you put pressure on, they will bend. And I feel that we have not done the kind of work in the international community to make sure that happens, and that we're leaving a lot of Democrats in Ethiopia in a very difficult place, a difficult situation. You know, to the Ethiopian government, I don't know what to say. I've had a lot of conversations with Ethiopian officials in Ethiopia and here at the embassy. I've spent a lot of time thinking about this. And I know it's a cliche, but it really is the rule of law that should be followed, not the rule by law. And I think that whenever I've tried to bring up the idea of Merera focusing more on the Constitution and juxtaposing the Constitution in his talk, he feels very bitter about, as many Ethiopians do, that it's a piece of paper and that it's used as both a blunt instrument and a sharp instrument to control the population. And I believe that it's not in the spirit of the Constitution, and I don't think it was in the spirit of the struggle that was taking place by the TPLF and the EPLF, leading up to the ouster of the Mengistu regime. And so Article 27, the end of the first part of the Ethiopian Constitution, freedom of religion, belief, and opinion, and Article 28, crimes against humanity. Part 2 is titled Democratic Rights. Rights of thought, opinion, and expression, the right of assembly, freedom of association, freedom of movement. That takes me to my personal observations. When I think of those articles, I think of sitting in Ethiopia, in Addis Ababa and Mekelle, in SNNPR, and in the many conversations I've had with people drop their voices low. They speak quietly. They look over their shoulders. Is that the kind of environment that reflects the Constitution? Honestly, if the government were to look in the mirror, is this the kind of environment they want to create, revolutionary democracy or not? And so I would also point out that there has to be some honesty and healing that happens in the whole region, and I bring this point up at almost every event I talk about Ethiopia or Eritrea, and that's at the Martyrs Memorial in Mekelle. It's a beautiful memorial, and it's got a very interesting museum talking about the history of the struggle, which was very difficult. But I find it really dishonest that there's not a single mention of the EPLF and its relationship and its role in that struggle. I think that would be one small step, one small olive branch to trying to create some healing and some honesty to move forward. So, to Merera and your presentation, I think you did a really excellent job. I think you really hit a lot of salient points. I'm really glad that we were in the room with you, making sure you cut out about 30 years of history that he wanted to talk about. He wanted to include a lot more nuance in his presentation, so please excuse him for that. I think you really make very good, solid, reasonable points, and I would challenge anyone in the room or anywhere around the world that the way forward for the opposition, the way forward in points of negotiation with the government, and the way forward of the diaspora and the international community are not perfectly reasonable requests. So I commend you for really distilling those and presenting them. I think that you needed to have a much clearer list of points that you can give to members of the opposition and to members of the diaspora, really spelling out in detail what kind of things do you suggest in your decades of experience and living the difficulties and the struggles and the hope and the aspiration. Make some really clearly defined points that could perhaps act as a starting point going forward. There's a lot more I could say. I'd just like to say thank you very much for all of you coming today. Cheers.
Thank you, Eric. We now have some time for Q&A. We do have microphones circulating. If you could identify yourself, if you would, and keep comments brief. We'll take a few questions from the floor to kick off. Would anybody like to begin? Carl Gershman from NED, and then we'll go to the person in the back, and then this person here.
Thanks. I have two questions. One was prompted by something Merera said, which looks backward, and then one which looks a little bit more forward. I was struck when you were talking about 2005, and you said that they opened up political space in response to domestic and international pressure. If you could just speak a little bit about that international pressure. What was it? That, looking back on that time, and I'm not making any political statements now, but that was, Bush's second inaugural. What happened in Iraq and what Bush was saying at the time, does that have something to do with this international pressure that you're talking about? Was it coming from elsewhere? But then the consequences of all that were quite negative. In other words, the government felt threatened and it cracked down harder. So what are your reflections on that? I mean, how can you properly exercise international pressure if you're going to put the government's back up against the wall and then it's going to crack down harder? I mean, just think about that and maybe talk to us about it. And then the second question has to do with, the Constitution, the principles that you outlined, Eric spoke to. How do you develop democratic culture? I mean, this is something we're grappling with at NED. The Constitution doesn't speak about, different linguistic conflicts and all the divisions. It speaks about individual rights and freedom of expression and tolerance for different points of view. How do you think? I mean, this is something NED does, but it's very, very hard. How can you really develop democratic culture? What initiatives can be taken to try to do that? Thanks.
I think we'll let Merera answer these two questions, and then we'll move to other questions. So, Merera, I'll put this on for you. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely both national and the domestic and international pressures are there. Internally, especially two major political groups, major coalitions came up, the UDF and the CUD, who could mobilize a lot of resources from the diaspora, and they used that very effectively at the beginning. And as international pressure, if you compare 2005 and 2010, or the run-up to 2005 and 2010, entirely different. For example, the American senators, congressmen, State Department officials, American ambassador in Ethiopia, The other big brothers, the British, the Germans, the French, they were talking to us. They were talking to the government. They were at least trying to tell them what to do and what not to do. After 2005, somehow the international community more or less abandoned. Either frightened by the Ethiopian government, probably sometimes they say, if you don't support us, there are Chinese, sort of thing. Or they say, we try to move the Ethiopian government, it's always there. Especially the Ethiopian government, I think, start to blackmail or undermine their efforts by using, I remember that, for example, when Prime Minister Mallas was alive, when both the Congress and the State Department are not with good terms with him, he was talking to the generals in Djibouti. Bypassing the State Department, other offices. So I think that before 2005, relatively there was international pressure, asking the Ethiopian regime walk your talk, sort of thing. I'm not saying real pressure. Real pressure is still to come, as far as we are concerned. Especially the international community refused to use its donors' leverage to tell the Ethiopian regime to change. Therefore, my reflection is that before 2005 elections, in the run-up to 2005 elections, there were some communications between us, donors grouping in Ethiopia, very often looking to the leadership of the United States to move forward. They were, one way or another, civil society groups were supported by the international community. There were some efforts. After that, I don't know, they abandoned. So there were some efforts. You know, in my reflection, sometimes the American officials are undermining their own position. One thing they say, that if we don't do this, if we stop or if we do that, the Chinese are going to come in. This is one argument. Probably the Ethiopian regime or leaders are also blackmailing them. The other thing is they could not know the real pressure, the real force, the real leverage the Americans have. Forget anything. Even when they steal, the Ethiopian leaders are investing in the U.S. Go to Ohio, go to New York, go to a lot of areas. The money is coming here. When they are running away, some Ethiopian ministers are here, they got sanctuary or whatever in the U.S. Even when they leave office, they come here. So in terms of human connection, there is, I don't know any Ethiopian official running to China or living in China or whatever in China. Coming to the U.S., even when they are, leaving office, when they are stealing, they are investing here. So I think the Americans have a lot of leverage, but because of the anti-terrorism, that should be clear. The anti-terrorism thing, we are sacrificed. Our democracy is being sacrificed. That is why, as I say, the State Department, the Americans, government should value its own democratic values, rather than being blackmailed by small dictators here and there. The other thing is, very quickly, sorry. The other thing, the question of culture, takes us long. I think that what I'm suggesting is starting to talk to each other, starting to make compromises. We have a lot of good cultures in Ethiopia, democratic culture, traditionally. But the problem is when we come to the modern elite, like me or some of my friends here. It is the modern elite who stopped to talk each other in a real way. We have some cultural traits, bad and good. That probably takes time, and we have good and bad cultures that can, especially good cultures that can be used for democracy. A lot of rural Ethiopia.
Thank you, Merera. May I see some hands? Okay, there was a gentleman in the back and a gentleman here. Good start.
Oh, okay. Is that on? My name is Brahan, and thank you, Dr. Merera, for your presentation. My question is more of on the model that you presented, on the effectiveness of the model you presented. There are people who say that think the electoral model will not work in Ethiopia. Rather, a national reconciliation model should be introduced. And there are people who strongly push that for a very good reason, including the ones you presented in your presentation. What do you say to that, because you are aware of some of those conversations on the reconciliation model instead of the electoral model? That is one question. The second question I have is on the basis of the politics itself. Ethiopia's politics is not based on anything but the identity of each ethnic group in that country. All political alignment, all economic alignments are made on the basis of the ethnic identity of the parties involved. And all the threats and the fears that we see, and the potential even for genocide, as the minority rights organization in UK recently released, is that the challenge is there. So when you made your presentation, your focus was more on the rule of law, representative governance, and democratic concepts, while the real issue is an issue of identity. Thank you.
Thank you. Why don't we go to Ali, who's nearby, and then this gentleman here.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm Ali Mure Ali from South Sudan, and Atlas Co-Harvard Youth Fellow, attending here in NET. Thank you very much, my colleague, the presenter. You did mention that, and of course we already know that during the 2005 Ethiopian elections, the report was that it falls sort of international standard, which can mean irregularities and probably lack of preparation of the citizens. So you did not mention in your presentation as to what is the capacity of the civil society organizations in Ethiopia in terms of democracy. May you at least shed some small light in that? And secondly, also back in Africa, especially in the region, we have a history that sometimes dictators can be removed when political parties form an alliance. The best example is Kenya. When the Kenyan political parties formed NACT, they removed President Daniel Arap Moi and put Moi Kibaki. What is the relationship among the political parties that exist in Ethiopia? Do they coordinate their political agendas so that they can come together as alliance and probably speak one language to, change the government for the betterment of the citizens of Ethiopia? Thank you.
Thank you, Ali. And then this gentleman here. Yes, please.
Dr. Merera, thank you for your solid presentation of the Ethiopian political landscape of over the last 23 years. I do have two questions. The first one is, at the end of April, Oromo students were killed because of their demand for to stop inappropriate expansion of Addis. What is the recent development and what measures you've taken? The second question is, you talked about the Ethiopian diaspora helps more, less accommodative political parties. Mm-hmm. What do you say by more accommodative? What's your take on that? Thank you.
Okay, thank you all very much. Merera, turn on your microphone here. Perfect. So.
Okay. What Dr. Brian Maskal has raised, I think the models are, to me, I don't worry about the models. The models can be made and remade, can be negotiated. Really, the EPRDF says it's so model, the opposition can have it as several models. The issue is not the question of models. The real issue is the question of making compromises by giving the take, negotiate, talk to each other rather than talking over each other. And especially the question of, the ending political polarization, the disease which has been with us since the 1960s. So I think we can negotiate over the models, whatever models. That is not important to me, but the human element in it, our capacity to negotiate, to talk to each other, to make compromises, to meet each other along a middle road, somewhere in the middle road or middle roads. That is what is important. We have a socialist model. We have a lot of models. I was in prison for 7 years because of the socialist model. And the models are not answers. It is human beings that should answer and could be able to answer things. The question of identity, I also am worried that as much as you are worried about what could the future holds for us if Ethiopian elite not take actions in time, not move forward in time, there is a possibility of the regime in power provoking ethnic violence. There were some signs. You know that in Gambela, in some parts of Oromia, in some places, in Benishangul and so on, in some parts of Ethiopia. Therefore, the danger is there. But the answers are in our hands. If we, in time, without delay, able to move forward, create the alliances that we can maintain rather than destroying. I think if we start to tell the Ethiopian people that we have differences, but we are leading you to somewhere, to democratic transformation. We assure you a future, sort of thing. We can avoid the danger. Otherwise, I also worried, as much as you said, that the danger is there down the road. The issue of ethnic identity, others, I don't have time much to dwell on it. I hope you have my book or buy my book on competing ethnic nationalisms. A lot of discussion on it. In fact, a whole book of whatever. The whole political fabric of Ethiopia, one way or another, is tied to that, and definitely it is there. That is why I called genuine federalism, the genuine federalism. That's why what I mean by negotiating on ethnic identities or over identities to come to the middle road. The question of the civil society, you know, our civil society, the nascent, emerging civil society was destroyed or has been destroyed since 2005. You know, the civil society law, it is targeted. You know, in a country as poor as Ethiopia, they said if you get more than 10% of support from outside, then you are an international NGO. They very well know that 90% of the support cannot come from poor Ethiopians. They know that. And the Ethiopians who have money cannot pay these people because it is supporting anti-government activities. Those who have cannot do it because of the political space. So the government consciously introduced a new law that destroy the nascent Ethiopian civil society. So they have very little role to play now. A lot of civil society organizations were simply either changed their role, either ran away, closed their offices, totally, especially the advocacy NGOs. They are totally out. I know that 9 million birr of the Ethiopian Human Rights Association and even 3 or 4 million Ethiopian Women Lawyers Association, even the so-called gender-sensitive government is blocked their money because they said it came from outside. So the civil society is more or less destroyed in Ethiopia. Few are existing. They are what we call the gongos, government-created NGOs, getting money from USAID and their other offices. Some USAID faces are here too. That's why I said. So the question of coordination between political parties, that's the whole, more or less half of my talk is geared to that. We are good at both alliance making and alliance breaking. Our problem is how to maintain alliances, durable alliances, create durable alliances and maintain them. That is at the center of our problem. And we can talk later. That's really our the disease we could not solve the last 40 years or so. Since the 1960s, it has with us. We could not solve it as we want to wish. The Oromo students, I think they are still being hunted. A lot of students are, for example, dismissed from universities. Still have several thousands are still detained, and some probably run away. But really, things are sad across Oromia. In fact, that it looked like the country's largest region is under a military rule. The security, the military, the police, whatever, can do whatever it wants whenever it wants. More accommodative, less accommodative. My language is softer, more accommodative, less accommodative, because if I use a more whatever language, it can hurt some of my friends here or my friends outside. And the question is really those who are not accepting a common goal, those who are refusing to come between to the middle road, one or another, for short time gains or for whatever gains. They are not helpful. They are not working for accommodative politics. What I'm saying is those who are trying to come to the middle road, rather than sitting at two poles and fighting each other. I say those are more accommodative who are coming probably to the middle road, trying to find a middle way to all questions. I'm there. That is why I'm probably advocating that road.
Just quickly on the point of civil society, I would be remiss working at NED if I didn't talk briefly about it. 2002, 2008, 2009, a trifecta of laws, the media law, the anti-terror law, and the civil society proclamation that was just referred to all came into force, a clear example of the rule by law. And most of the people with whom we've interacted over the years have been impacted by one or, in a couple of cases, all three of those laws. The recent spate of arrests, strangely enough, as we move closer and closer to 2015 elections, which is the, what did you call them, the detentions, preventive detentions, thank you, seem to be going into play. Also, just to expand slightly on the 90-10, it's even worse than that. As 90-10, some of that was relaxed by the efforts of the EU and the World Bank, put real pressure on the Ethiopian government to allow some of their funds. It was a, hey, if you want all this money, you need to allow some of this money to be counted as domestic dollars for civil society organizations. However, even worse than 90-10 is the 70-30, which is not a clear interpretation, but it's 70% of the money has to be used for programmatic activities and 30% toward administration. And the line on that is not clear, and it's shifting. If they want to shut someone down, they just say, no, that's not a program activity, it's too much administrative, you're shut down. And so I think that the international community needs to be much more vociferous about that, in particularly one international aid agency that was referred to just a little bit ago. Thanks.
Okay, two questions right here, please. And there. Okay, we've got a lot, so we'll keep going. We have a little more time. Yes, sir.
Thank you. My name is Tufa, and I come from the Oromo Center here in Washington, D.C. I have a comment, so I'll make a comment, and I have a question for the good doctor. The Oromo people in Ethiopia are really besieged, than any other ethnic group. Dr. Merera as well knows this. So when you in the West, as well as Dr. Merera here says, speak in one voice, the diaspora should speak in one voice, we find it very difficult because we don't have friends among the Ethiopian diaspora. Sometimes during the killing of the students, we had people who have, to a great extent, came to our demonstrations and so on and so forth.
Could you speak up, please? And
Yeah.
please come to your question. There will be time.
Okay. So my question is, it's well and good to speak in one voice, but the voice we can speak is not there. That's what one should understand. We have a long history of divergent views in that country, and Dr. Merera knows that.
Thank you. The question had to do with the Oromo community here in the diaspora feeling that their views are not included, so how can they speak with one voice? The person next to him, please.
Yeah, my name is Merera Soboksa. I'm representing TASC, the Torture Abolition and the Survivor Support Coalition International. I'm also a member of the Oromo community here. We are in the same birthplace with Dr. Merera. I know him as an activist.
Thank you.
I have seen two political frauds in my life. One is the Soviet National Democratic Revolution, and the second one is which is clearly and elaborately defined by Dr. Merera, the revolutionary democracy. And revolutionary democracy is nothing but minority dictatorship.
Okay.
And the land issue, the Oromo question is the land issue.
Yes.
It is not addressed here.
Okay. Thank you very much.
It's not really addressed here. Our question is a question of land grab, and that's not properly addressed.
Okay. Thank you very much for your comment. We had others with their hands raised over here. I guess this gentleman. And then we'll take this person up front. So because we have so many questions, I ask that you keep your questions brief. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. My name is Siyum Mengesha. My question first is for Dr. Merera is that when you try to get to the middle road, can you give us one specific example? Let me say, if we have a land policy that can work in Oromia with some platform of the land policy, can you talk to Andernet or between Andernet and the Medrek so that they could have different land policy in North Ethiopia and different land policy in South Ethiopia so that these two parties can come together and create coalition so that they can win an election. If you win with your own land policy in the state of Oromia, then the Andernet can win within different states with their own land policy. So when we mean a genuine federalism, that is how I believe it should work, to agree on your own state when you're not agree on different other states.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so
I have to ask you to pass the microphone.
Only one.
Well, there will be time afterwards. Merera has said that he is ready to talk after the presentation. Okay, we will come back for one more round. Okay, we're going to have a translator, right?
ስሜ ሰለሞን ያሬድ ይባላል። የመጣሁት ከታስክ ነው። የምጠይቀውም ጥያቄ ምንድነው? አሁን ከፊታችን የ2007 ምርጫ እየመጣ ነው እና
Okay, I'd like to have a translation, please.
He said he introduced his name. His name is Solomon, and he came from Task International. He's a member of Task International.
Okay.
ሶ የምጠይቀው ጥያቄ በሚቀጥለው ኔክስት ይር ምርጫ አለ እና እዛ ምርጫ ላይ የናንተ አንድነትና ምክንያቱም አሁን ብትንትን ያለ ሁኔታ ነው ያለው።
What he is saying is in the next year 2015 a national election is upcoming.
Okay.
And your the status of the opposition parties right now is a kind of dispersed.
Yes. Okay.
እና ምን ያህል ነው የተዘጋጃችሁ ያላችሁት በአንድነቱ ናችሁ እስካልታገላችሁ ድረስ አሁንም በተበታተነ ሁኔታ ላይ ያደግና አካሄድ ማቆም አይቻልምና አንድነታችሁ ተጠናክሮ ቀጥሏል ወይ ለማለት ነው። አመሰግናለሁ።
So how are you thinking to overthrow the APRDF unless you get united? So
Okay.
what is the way how you?
Okay, thank you for your question. That's a good question. All right, I'm going to let Merera briefly answer these questions, and then we'll take one more round, and then we'll wrap up.
Okay, the question of Oromos having a few friends. I think the problem should be both that of Oromos and the rest of Ethiopians. If the Oromos are trying to make friends, I think Oromos are the largest group in the country. They could do it. They could have a lot of friends. That is, my question to you is, are the Oromos also ready to make friends, real friends, not only expecting others to be friends, but also trying to make others their friends? That is one. The second thing is, I'm not talking when I say speak with one voice. It is not the question of policies. Policies are you could have a lot of policies, but the question is the question of democratization, the future of the country, whether how to stay together, how to democratize, and how to create the Ethiopia that can equally treat all of us. If we agree on it, the question of land policy, the question of other policies, I come to it. They are we should not need to agree on them. If we agree on them, it is good. But the question is not agreeing on each and different policies, but the question of agreeing on the whole larger agenda of transforming the Ethiopian state, a democratized Ethiopian state, which can treat all of us equally. That's the question. The question of speaking in one voice, is speaking for democratization in one voice, to transform Ethiopia in one voice. But on the question of different policies, we can have a lot of different policies. The question of land grabbing, I have raised it in my own language. Probably I will try to make later clear. I raised it. It is a question of land grabbing, displacement because of the killings going on even when Kerry was in Ethiopia. The question of the middle road, I think the people know the middle road. We know the middle road. The problem is the question of trying to achieve what we call short-term agendas, to push trying to outsmart others, that we can see you, probably more seats, more our political party bigger than the other party, sort of thing. We call, for example, trying to be an Aura party. In Ethiopia, Aura means, I call it Aure party, not Aura party. Trying to do that unnecessary. Aure means to big animal, that can eat others, sort of thing. So the question is, for example, if you take UDJ and the Madrak, the rest of Madrak members, we agreed on 101 issues. Only we disagreed on basic two issues, land and the question of federalism. And we also agreed initially that we can table that for the future elected government in Ethiopia, which can probably take that to referendum or whatever. Therefore, we basically disagreed on two basic issues. And I can't discuss with friends in whatever level. Our problem is not that issue. Our problem is really the question of trying to gain what we call short-term gains over others, and that is the question of alliance making. Is really the question of making politics a sort of a football game, where the tifoso, the fans are supporting whatever its group is doing. It should win, whether it is by hands or whatever. That type of politics is hurting us. Otherwise, we talk over it later with some Ethiopians who are interested. It's the middle road is clear, and it is the occasion of coming to try a common democratic agenda, trying to push a common democratic agenda. The rest of the Ethiopian people should decide whether left or right. the elections in 2050. The land question also, it's not the same in Ethiopia. Historically in the north, it is different. Historically in the south, it's different. Ethiopia lived for centuries without one land question, one land reform, one land policy. Therefore, there is no reason why we cannot live in the future too. Really, I don't think the issue is really that. The issue is other hidden, whatever issues here and there. The 2050s, that is why I'm crying. Without moving fast, without really investing in the common agenda, without creating a political force, a relevant political force, which can speak to the international community, which can also mobilize millions of Ethiopians. The 2015, we say in Ethiopia, Yetabalaku. Yetabalaku peace, you know, I don't know, lottery that is already won, already taken, or whatever, already lost, type of thing. That is why I'm crying. We should move in time and put aside some of our differences. As Eric is advising us, to agree on basic issues that we can agree, that can we create a major relevant political force that can speak to the Ethiopian people and also speak to the international community. That means creating an alternative political force in Ethiopia. Without creating that, forget about the elections.
I think since we've come to the end of our time, I'm going to end on this note, and I will ask those who haven't had a chance to ask their question to come up afterwards or to meet with Merera afterwards. Merera, in your talk today, you have called for reconciliation, for alliances, for compromise, for negotiation, for democratization. This is the voice of reason, which I hope many audiences will listen to in the government of Ethiopia, in the opposition, in the diaspora, in the international community, and in this room today. I want to thank you very much for your remarks.
Okay. Good.